Welcome to Chapter 5. Going to the doctor can be an overwhelming experience. There are usually forms to fill out, and most people feel some anxiety about the visit. On top of that, people can feel that they don't have much control over the situation. In reality, patients have many rights when it comes to their medical care. These rights are in a list referred to as the Patient's Bill of Rights. This chapter explains the different elements of this important document. With rights come responsibilities. For patients, this includes meeting insurance responsibilities. This chapter also goes over what insurance terms patients need to understand to meet their obligations. The chapter ends with information patients need when preparing for a medical procedure. In 1998, President Clinton created the President's Advisory Commission on Consumer Protection and Quality in the Healthcare Industry. The purpose of the commission was to make recommendations to make sure that patients receive high-quality health care. From this work emerged a document called the Consumer Bill of Rights and Responsibilities, referred to as the Patient's Bill of Rights. The document strengthens consumer confidence by making sure that the healthcare system is fair and responsible to consumers' needs, provides them with credible, effective mechanisms for addressing their concerns, and encourages them to take an active role in improving their health. It reaffirms the importance of a strong relationship between patients and their healthcare professionals. The Patient's Bill of Rights also reaffirms the critical role consumers play in safeguarding their health by establishing rights and responsibilities for all participants in improving their health. This information may be presented to patients when they are admitted to a healthcare facility or come to the office for treatment. Some offices post them in a prominent place. It's your job to explain procedures to patients and to make sure they provide written consent. The next section explains this process in more detail. First, you need to be familiar with the Patient's Bill of Rights. It includes 8 points. First is information disclosure. Patients have a right to receive accurate, easily understood information about their health plan, healthcare professionals, and healthcare facilities. If a patient speaks another language, has a physical or mental disability, or doesn't understand something, provide assistance so that the patient can make informed healthcare decisions. Second, choice of providers and plans. Patients have a right to choose their providers, giving them access to appropriate, high-quality health care. Third, access to emergency services. If a patient has severe pain, an injury, or a sudden illness that convinces him that his health is in serious jeopardy, he has the right to receive screening and stabilization emergency services whenever and wherever without prior authorization or financial penalty. Fourth, participation in treatment decisions. Patients have the right to know all their treatment options and to participate in decisions about their care. Parents, guardians, family members, or other individuals designated by patients can represent them if they can't make their own decisions. Fifth, respect and non-discrimination. Patients have the right to considerate, respectful, and non-discriminatory care from providers and healthcare representatives. Sixth, confidentiality of health information. Patients have the right to talk in confidence with providers and have their healthcare information protected. While physicians own the medical records, patients have the right to review and copy their own medical record. and request that the provider amend the record if it's not accurate, relevant, or complete. Seventh, complaints and appeals. Patients have the right to a fair, fast, and objective review of any complaint against the health plan, providers, hospitals, or other health care personnel. This includes complaints about waiting times, operating hours, the conduct of healthcare personnel, and the adequacy of healthcare facilities. Eighth, consumer responsibilities. In a healthcare system that protects consumer rights, it's reasonable to expect and encourage consumers to assume reasonable responsibilities in their care. Greater individual involvement by consumers increases the likelihood of achieving the best outcomes. It also helps support a quality improvement, cost-conscious environment. You must explain each of these 8 points to the patient. For a more detailed discussion of topics you need to cover as a CMAA, continue learning. Information disclosure. This means having brochures, fact sheets, and other materials available to give to patients who speak English. These materials help them understand their medical condition and treatment options. For non-English speakers and those with disabilities, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, says that you must make accommodations so that communication can take place. This involves having educational materials available in the predominant language or languages spoken in the community, having materials in Braille, and having access to a sign language interpreter. Choice of providers and plans. Make sure that patients are aware that depending on their health plans, there can be some limitations on their choice of providers. For example, some health plans require that patients choose providers from a network, and some networks are more extensive than others. But if a patient likes a provider, she has the right to continue seeing that person. Similarly, if the patient would like to switch providers, that is allowed too. If the patient wants or needs to see a specialist, she might need a referral from your office. A referral tells the specialist that the patient is authorized for treatment. Access to emergency services. Check your office's policies about emergency treatment. There may be some referral requirements, or the patient's health plan may have restrictions. Make sure the patient is aware of the procedures in place for emergency services. For example, Sample Medical Practice has an agreement with Sample Medical Center and Sample Ambulance Service, allowing for expedient quality care in the event of an emergency in our office. Verification of insurance benefits with these providers is the responsibility of the patient. This practice is not responsible for verifying payment authorization of emergency services. Participation in treatment decisions. Explain that while providers were viewed as the source of all medical knowledge in making decisions for patients in the past, that is changing. There is now a trend toward shared decision-making. This means that the patient and provider work together to decide on a treatment plan. Shared decision-making is another reason patients need access to information. A related scenario involves a provider's obligations to patients once they establish a relationship. If a provider decides to stop seeing a patient, he must give the patient sufficient time to find another provider. Also, the provider should write a letter of withdrawal from medical care and have it delivered by certified mail, with a return receipt requested. The letter must state that he is discontinuing professional care, that he will give copies of the patient's records to another provider on request, and that the patient should seek the care of another provider as soon as possible. Put a copy of this letter and the return receipt in the patient's medical record and retain the letter permanently. Give the patient a reasonable amount of time to find another provider. If the provider is not careful to follow these rules, he could be vulnerable to a lawsuit for abandonment, which means discontinuing medical care without giving the proper notice. If a patient wants to terminate care with the provider, she does not have to inform the office. If the patient does choose to inform the office manager, then it's customary to request a letter confirming the termination of the relationship. Respect and non-discrimination. Review the office policy on discrimination to make sure that it treats every patient with respect. All employees must be courteous and considerate to every patient and visitor. Confidentiality of health information. Explain to patients that their health information is confidential, and the medical practice will do everything possible to respect their confidentiality. Also, explain that their records belong to the medical practice, but they also have the right to see them. This often involves submitting a request in writing. Complaints and appeals. Give patients information about how to submit complaints and file grievances. Consumer responsibility. The provider bears responsibility in making sure she gives the best quality of care, but the patient also bears responsibility for making sure he gets the best quality care. For providers, this means working with other staff members to make sure that the office maintains the highest level of quality while remaining cost-conscious. For patients, it means becoming knowledgeable about their health so that they can be active partners in their care. This should result in the best, most cost-effective treatment. In all interactions with patients, the medical staff must be sensitive to patients' needs and desires. To achieve this goal, the staff must understand the patient's Bill of Rights and incorporate it into all their dealings with patients. Since the Affordable Care Act passed, the following points were added to the patient's Bill of Rights. Ban on discriminating against children with pre-existing conditions. Before reform, insurance companies could deny a family insurance because of a child's pre-existing illness or disorder. As of 2014, this practice is not allowed. Ban on insurance companies dropping coverage. Previously, insurance companies could drop consumers, even if they were very sick, due to a mistake on their application. This is no longer permitted. Ban on insurance companies limiting coverage. Previously, there was a cap on the amount of coverage insurance companies would pay over a person's lifetime. For those suffering from a chronic disease, this could mean that insurance could be cut off. This is no longer allowed. As of 2014, annual limits for all forms of health care, hospital provider and pharmacy, are also banned. Insurance companies can no longer restrict the dollars spent on health care each year. Ban on insurance companies limiting choice of providers. Insurance companies can no longer determine which providers patients choose. Patients can now choose their own providers within the plan's network. Ban on restricting emergency room care. Insurance carriers can no longer determine where patients go for emergency care, or charge more if they go out of network. Guarantee patients' right to appeal. Previously, consumers had few options if an insurance carrier denied or restricted treatment. Now, they're guaranteed the right to appeal. Coverage for young adults. As of 2010, adult children can stay on their parents' health insurance plan up to the age of 26. This applies to married and unmarried children and is an option even if the young adults are offered health insurance through an employer. Covering preventive care at no cost. Consumers can now receive preventive care, such as mammograms, colonoscopies, immunizations, and prenatal and new baby care, at no cost. Before treating patients, providers must have permission or consent. When a patient comes to the office for routine care, consent is usually implied. This kind of consent, called implied consent, is sufficient for common or simple procedures that typically involve little risk. Blood drawing or phlebotomy and taking vital signs, such as blood pressure and temperature, fall under this category. In some instances, it's sufficient to receive verbal consent. This kind of consent is more direct than implicit consent because it's said out loud in response to a pointed question. It does not, however, have the legal clout of informed consent, which providers must get for more complex procedures. Informed consent involves making sure the patient has a full understanding of her condition and enough information to make a decision about treatment options. Therefore, the provider must have a conversation with the patient or the patient's legal representative, presenting the necessary information. According to the American Medical Association, the conversation needs to include the following: patient's diagnosis, if known, nature and purpose of the proposed treatment or procedure, risks and benefits of the proposed treatment or procedure, alternative treatments or procedures regardless of cost or extent to which health insurance covers the treatment options, risks and benefits of the alternative treatment or treatments and procedure or procedures, and risks and benefits of not receiving or undergoing a treatment or procedure. As a CMAA, you must document the conversation, but the provider is the one who must have the conversation with the patient. Your role is to present the informed consent document to the patient and witness as the patient signs. You should become familiar with each state's individual consent laws. There are legal consequences to not following the laws surrounding informed consent. If a provider doesn't get informed consent, he faces charges of assault and battery, which is willful and unlawful use of force or violence on another person. If an individual is incompetent for reason of insanity or another issue, that individual usually can't give consent for medical treatment. In that case, the provider can then obtain consent from a guardian. When a patient is a minor, you must obtain consent for surgery or treatment from a parent or guardian, except in an emergency situation. If the parents are legally separated or divorced, then consent must come from the custodial parent. If the child is visiting the other parent, you can obtain consent from that parent because that parent has temporary custody. Consent is not required for minors under the following circumstances: when consent may be implied, such as in a life-threatening situation, when law requires certain treatment, such as a vaccination or an X-ray for school entry or safety, or when a court issues an order for necessary treatment if parents withhold consent for religious reasons. In many states, treatment for sexually transmitted diseases, drug abuse, alcohol dependency, pregnancy, or providing birth control does not require consent from parents. In some instances, minors are emancipated. An emancipated minor is a person younger than the age of the majority, usually 18, but up to 21 in some states, who is married, in the armed forces, living apart from parents or a guardian, or self-supporting. In these instances, you don't have to obtain parental consent. Health insurance helps individuals and patients offset the costs of medical care. It protects against financial losses resulting from illness or injury. Health insurance covers services and procedures that are medically necessary. The patient bears financial responsibilities in the form of co-payments, co-insurance, and deductibles. Co-payments are a fixed dollar amount that a patient must pay each time he visits a provider. Co-payments may vary from provider to provider. A visit to an outpatient clinic might have a $15 copay, while the copay for outpatient surgery might be $50. Co-insurance is the pre-established percentage of expenses that an insurance company pays after the patient meets a deductible. Many plans have an 80-20 formula in place, meaning the insurance company pays 80% of the costs and the member pays 20%. For example, if the cost of a medical service is $500, the insurance company pays $400 and the member pays $100. Deductibles refer to the amount of money patients must pay out of pocket before the insurance company starts to pay for covered benefits. Deductibles vary considerably from plan to plan. The patient must meet the deductible for each calendar year. Any expenses not covered or disallowed are not applied to the deductible. They are strictly the patient's responsibility. There are limits to how much the insurance company reimburses for the cost of a procedure. This is the allowable amount, or the maximum amount of money many third-party payers, both government and private insurance companies, allow for a procedure or service. The provider doesn't write off or pass on the allowable amount. The difference between the billed amount and the allowable amount is what's written off or passed on to the patient. The patient receives the Explanation of Benefits, or EOB, from the insurance carrier. This document identifies what the insurance pays, reduces, or denies. It also lists the deductible, coinsurance, and allowable amount. Medicare patients receive a similar document called the Medicare Summary Notice, or MSN. Both documents prepare the patient for what bills to expect. Finally, many plans have a maximum out-of-pocket provision in place. After the members reach a predetermined amount, the insurance company will pay 100% of the cost of the medical service. For example, A health plan can establish $5,000 as its maximum amount. A patient covered by that plan who has major surgery will pay out of pocket up to $5,000, but nothing after that. Finally, many plans have a People have several options for health insurance. The government offers health plans for specialized audiences. Medicare is mostly for people age 65 and older, with some exceptions. Medicaid is for families and individuals with disabilities or limited financial resources. Most people get their insurance through commercial sources, by purchasing private insurance through an insurance company. Premiums paid directly to the company subsidizes their health care. Another option is to get health insurance through employers. If the employer self-insures these plans, they tend to be lower cost because additional fees aren't built into the premiums. The employers budget a certain amount for employees' claims, which employers pay as they come in. Some employers purchase group plans for their employees. The ACA gives individuals and families another place to go for health insurance, the Federal Insurance Marketplace. Opened in October 2013, the Marketplace provides consumers with an online place to shop for health insurance. Consumers can compare plans in their area, get answers to questions, and find out if they're eligible for tax credits, which are available for private and some government insurance plans. Some states have marketplaces set up where consumers can shop as well. The Small Business Health Options Program, or SHOP, opened in 2014. Like the marketplace for consumers, SHOP provides small businesses with a streamlined opportunity to purchase high-quality health insurance for their employees. There is no open enrollment for this service, so small business employers can buy health insurance throughout the year. Medicare provides health insurance to people 65 years of age or older, people younger than 65 with certain disabilities, and all people who have end-stage kidney disease. Medicare has the following 4 parts: Medicare Part A, Medicare Part B, Medicare Advantage, and Medicare Part D. The first part of Medicare is Medicare Part A. Medicare Part A provides hospitalization insurance. It's generally free of charge to individuals eligible for the Medicare benefit. Healthcare services covered include inpatient hospital care, skilled nursing facility care, home health care, hospice care, and inpatient care in a religious non-medical healthcare institution. Benefit periods measure inpatient hospital coverage and coverage for skilled nursing facility care. A benefit period begins when the patient is admitted to a hospital or skilled nursing facility. A benefit period ends when the patient doesn't receive care for 60 days in a row. There are certain limitations on how much coverage Medicare Part A pays for each kind of service. The second part of Medicare is Medicare Part B. Under Medicare Part B, people can purchase voluntary supplemental medical insurance, or SMI, to help pay for providers and other medical professionals' services, medical services, and medical surgical supplies not covered by Medicare Part A. Other services covered include care provided at an emergency department or outpatient clinic, such as same-day surgery, home health care not covered under Part A, laboratory tests, x-rays, and other diagnostic radiology services, ambulatory surgery center services at Medicare-approved facilities, most physical, speech, and occupational therapy services, radiation therapy, kidney dialysis, and transplants, heart and liver transplants, and inpatient hospitalizations when the patient exhausts all Part A benefits. Services not covered by Medicare Part A or Part B include long-term nursing care, cosmetic surgery, dentures and dental care, acupuncture, or hearing aids and exams for fitting hearing aids. The third part of Medicare is Medicare Advantage plans. Medicare Advantage, or MA plans, offer a combined package of the benefits under both Parts A and B. In some instances, these plans may offer extra coverage for services such as vision, hearing, dental, or health and wellness programs. Many also include prescription drug coverage. Organizations offering MA plans must meet specific requirements from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS. The following options are available through Medicare Advantage: health maintenance organizations, preferred provider organizations, and private fee-for-service plans. Except in an emergency, health maintenance organizations, or HMOs, allow patients to only go to providers, other healthcare professionals, or hospitals on the plan's list of approved providers. Preferred provider organizations, or PPOs, allow patients to use doctors, specialists, and hospitals in the plan's network. Going to doctors and hospitals not on the list usually means that patients will have to pay extra. Private fee-for-service plans allow patients to go to any doctor, other healthcare professional, or hospital, as long as the providers agree to treat those patients. The plan determines how much it will pay providers and how much patients must pay for care. People enrolled in Medicare may receive an advance beneficiary notice of non-coverage, or ABN, if there is a possibility that Medicare will deny coverage. Items that may fall into this category include certain Part A services, such as hospice care or home health agencies, and certain Part B outpatient services. Your office may send out an ABN if there is concern that Medicare won't cover a particular service, if Medicare usually pays for that service, or if Medicare may not consider the particular service medically necessary for a particular patient in a particular plan. You may also use this form to alert patients to services that Medicare never covers. Medicare's specialty plans provide focused, specialized health care for specific groups of people, such as those who have both Medicare and Medicaid, live in a nursing home, or have chronic medical conditions. The fourth part of Medicare is Medicare Part D. Medicare Part D pays for medications. The drug benefit is run by private insurance companies and other vendors approved by Medicare. There are many plans to choose from, and they can vary in cost and drugs covered. Beneficiaries can choose the plan that best meets their needs. Out-of-pocket expenses mostly come up for people who choose the fee-for-service option. They're responsible for charges that Medicare doesn't cover, as well as for various cost-sharing requirements of Parts A and B. The Medicare beneficiary, an employer-sponsored health plan, or Medigap, may pay these expenses. Medigap is a private health insurance that pays for most of the charges that Parts A and B don't cover. If a beneficiary is eligible for Medicaid, It could pay for some of the outstanding expenses that Medicare doesn't cover. The federal Medicaid program partners with state governments to fund this government-based health insurance option. Medicaid pays for medical assistance for individuals who have low incomes and limited financial resources. To participate in this program, states must meet national guidelines established by federal laws, regulations, and policies. If the states meet those requirements, they qualify for federal matching grants. Each state has its own agency that determines Medicaid eligibility for its residents. Medicaid policies vary from state to state, so a person eligible in one state might not be eligible in another. However, the federal government lists the following as categorically needy eligible groups: those who meet the requirements for temporary assistance for needy families, or TANF, children below the age of 6 whose family income is at or below 133% of the federal poverty level, women who are pregnant whose family income is below 133% of the federal poverty level, supplemental security income recipients in most states, recipients of adoption or foster care assistance, individuals who lose their cash assistance due to earnings from work or increased Social Security benefits, infants born to Medicaid-eligible women, and certain low-income Medicare recipients. To receive federal matching funds, Medicaid must provide medical assistance for the following services: inpatient hospital. To receive federal matching funds, Medicaid must provide medical assistance for the following services: inpatient hospital care, outpatient hospital care, emergency care, prenatal care, vaccines for children, providers services, skilled nursing facility services for persons aged 2 or older, family planning services and supplies, rural health clinic services, home health care for persons eligible for skilled nursing services, laboratory and X-ray services, pediatric and family nurse practitioner services, nurse midwife services, federally qualified health center services, federally qualified ambulatory services performed at a health center that may be available in other settings, and early and periodic screening, diagnosis, and therapeutic services for children under age 21. States may also receive federal matching funds to provide some of the following optional services: diagnostic services, clinic services, prescription drugs and prosthetic devices, transportation services, rehabilitation and physical therapy services, and home care and community-based care services for persons with chronic impairments. The federal government and the states also jointly fund the State Children's Health Insurance Program, or CHIP. States must meet the following 3 eligibility criteria: recipients must come from low-income families, recipients must be otherwise ineligible for Medicaid, and recipients must be uninsured. States must offer the following services: inpatient hospital care, outpatient hospital care, providers' surgical and medical services, laboratory and X-ray services, and routine care for infants and children, including age-appropriate immunizations. Commercial insurance refers to 3 kinds of insurance: individual, employer-sponsored, and employer-based self-insurance. The individual pays for individual insurance plans, while employer-based self-insurance is tied to an individual's place of employment. In individual health insurance plans, people pay premiums. Premiums are a pre-established amount set by the insurance company. Individuals pay these premiums regularly, usually on a monthly basis. The premiums of all the plan's participants go into a fund. The money in that fund pays for claims. Before paying a claim, the company reviews it carefully to make sure the plan covers the service. It also checks the diagnosis codes to make sure the services are medically necessary. After these steps, the insurance company pays either the provider or the policyholder. A policyholder gets upfront information before signing on to a plan. This includes what medical services the plan covers, when the company pays for those medical services, how much and for how long the company pays for the covered services, and which process the policyholder must follow to make sure the plan pays the covered medical expenses. Some patients may say they have plans through Obamacare. What they mean is that they purchased a plan through a carrier on the ACA marketplace, such as Aetna or Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Those plans will likely fit a managed care model. Managed care refers to plans that provide care in return for preset scheduled payments. It also refers to plans that coordinate health care through a network of primary care providers, or PCPs, hospitals, and other providers. There are two common types of managed care plans: health maintenance organizations, or HMOs, and preferred provider organizations, or PPOs. HMOs provide comprehensive health care to an enrolled group for a fixed period of time. Some of these plans pay by capitation, meaning that the provider receives a fixed amount for each individual enrolled in the plan during a specific period of time, regardless of the expense or number of services the patient receives. There are pros and cons to managed care. Managed care contains health care costs, uses established fee schedules, compensates authorized services, and keeps patients' out-of-pocket expenses lower than those of traditional insurance. However, managed care can limit both access to specialized care and physicians' choices in the treatment of patients, the paperwork can be greater, and patients might experience a delay in treatment due to pre-authorization requirements. For these reasons, it's important for you to understand which services managed care covers, which services managed care does not cover, and which services require special forms for billing. With this information, you can explain covered benefits to patients and the steps they must take for procedures and services requiring pre-approval. Under the PPO model, an insurer representing clients, whether an individual or a business, contracts with a group of providers who agree on a predetermined list of charges for all services. These include both normal and complex procedures. Unlike HMOs, PPOs have no capitation or prepaid care. These plans usually have deductibles and/or co-insurance payments of 20 to 25%. The insurer then pays the balance. Providers like this model because it preserves the fee-for-service approach, where the provider is reimbursed for the care she gives. When a patient has coverage under a PPO plan, the provider treats the patient and then bills the PPO. To choose providers, subscribers receive a list of those in the network. Rates of those providers are typically lower than those outside the network. So, if a patient goes to an out-of-network provider, the out-of-pocket costs are higher. The idea behind employer-based self-insurance plans is that companies save money by self-insuring their employee health plans rather than purchasing coverage from private insurance companies. Self-insurance costs are lower because there aren't the additional fees built into premiums by private insurers. Employer-based self-insurance plans vary in design and what services the plans cover. Many have a cost-sharing feature, where money comes out of employees' paychecks each pay period. Because of economies of scale, costs of employer-based health insurance plans tend to be lower than those that individuals purchase. Many self-insured employers strike contracts with private insurers. Under these contracts, employers fund the plans themselves, and the private insurers administer the plans for the employers. Blue Cross and Blue Shield plans were the first prepaid plans in the United States. Originally, Blue Cross covered hospital care, and Blue Shield covered providers' services. They merged to form the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association, or BCBS, in 1982. BCBS, also called the Blues, includes more than 60 independent, locally operated companies with plans in 50 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. BCBS offers health insurance to individuals, small businesses, seniors, and large employer groups. The federal government also has a large program called the BCBS Federal Employee Program. Blue Cross and Blue Shield plans As a CMAA, you may be the one to arrange outpatient diagnostic testing and procedures. Testing can include magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, computed tomography, or CT scans, X-ray evaluations, ultrasound testing, and blood tests. Possible procedures include dilation and curettage, D&C, and biopsies. When setting up appointments for diagnostic testing or procedures, take the following steps. Number 1, get a written order from the provider that describes the exact procedure he will perform. If he needs a referral, make sure you have a copy of that. This paperwork provides the necessary documentation for the test or procedure. Number 2, get pre-authorization if the patient's insurance requires it. Pre-authorization involves notifying the health insurance plan that a patient needs a procedure, giving the insurance company the opportunity to determine whether the procedure is medically necessary. This validates the insurance benefits and covers the patient's medical needs. Number 3, make sure the patient is available for the scheduled time of the test or procedure. If the provider needs to be there, make sure she's available as well. Number 4, confirm that the diagnostic facility is a participating provider with the patient's insurance company. Then call the facility and schedule the patient's procedure or test. Remember to follow these steps. Order the test, provide the patient's diagnosis and orders, establish the date and time for the procedure, give the patient's name, age, address, and telephone number, provide the patient's demographic information, including identification and insurance policy numbers, as well as addresses for filing claims, determine any special instructions for the patient or special anesthesia requirements, notify the facility of any urgency for test results. Number 5. Let the patient know about the arrangements. Make sure to inform the patient of the following: name, address, and telephone number of the facility, date and time to report for the test, instructions for preparing for the test, including eating restrictions, fluid requirements, and whether the patient should take any medications, information about pre-admission testing, the need to bring a form of picture identification and insurance card to the facility on the day of the procedure, and whether the patient needs to pick up orders or whether you will forward orders to the facility in advance. After going through the list, ask the patient to repeat the instructions. Also, remind the patient of the importance of keeping the appointment and arriving on time. Number 6. Have the provider review the consent form with the patient. The patient needs to sign the consent form. Put a copy in his medical record. This process validates that the patient understands the risks, benefits, and alternatives to the procedure. Number 7. Document the information in the patient's chart. Then check the patient's status following the procedure. Make sure the patient is following the provider's post-procedure instructions. Follow up with the facility if you don't receive prompt results. Patients play a key role in their health care. This chapter identified what patients' rights are and emphasized the importance of explaining these rights. You must tell all patients, including those who have disabilities or language barriers, their rights in a way they can understand. With rights come responsibilities. The chapter also explained patients' financial responsibilities, which usually are in the form of copayments, coinsurance, and deductibles. The chapter ended with a discussion on the steps that you must follow to schedule procedures and tests, and inform the patient of what he or she needs to do before and after the procedure. The next chapter revisits many of the ideas already discussed, but from the perspective of office practices that you need to perform on a regular basis.